What comes to mind when you think about research? Probably a laboratory with test tubes, microscopes, and scientists wearing white lab coats. This setup is ideal for researchers in some disciplines, such as virologists studying viral infections, physicists developing new electronic devices, or chemists creating new materials. Other possibilities, such as someone digging through historical archives or someone distributing surveys about consumer preferences, may also come to mind. That's research too. So what is research? What unites these very different approaches? They share the same fundamental goal, the creation of new knowledge or ideas. Every good research project begins with a question that has no known answer. These questions vary from field to field. A research product can be something tangible, such as a new drug for curing a particular disease, or it can be intangible, such as a new understanding of an archival text. Many people associate the idea of research with the scientific method, a cyclical process of posing questions and reaching conclusions. The first step in this process is making observations and asking questions, so that they can observe, verify, and ask their own questions. Existing research team. Luckily, there are numerous ways that you can get involved with research. One pathway that leads to a career in research involves attending college and eventually pursuing an advanced degree such as a PhD. But even people who don't have a college education can contribute to research projects, for instance by participating in surveys or helping researchers gather data. Through research, you can contribute to tackling major obstacles of our generation, from conserving endangered species to monitoring public health crises. As long as you're curious and hardworking, research is for you.
Good survey questions. Hi, I'm Dr. Nick, and I'm going to talk about the questions you ask in a questionnaire or survey. This video follows on from another video designing a questionnaire. These ideas are also useful for critiquing a questionnaire or survey. It is very important that the questions in a questionnaire are well written to find out what you want to know and to avoid bias or non-sampling error. There are different types of questions. Open questions let the respondent say what they like, while closed questions give respondents a choice of response. Open questions are useful when you do not know how people are likely to respond, or when you want to avoid influencing their response. But open questions can be very difficult to analyse as there are so many different ways that they can be answered. You might think that it is easy to ask good questions in a questionnaire, but it isn't. You want to make it as easy as possible for the respondent to give you the information you want. To start with, the questions should be as short as possible. Questions need to have correct spelling and grammar. Questions should use language appropriate to the subject and the people you are asking. If you are asking experts, you can use technical language, but generally you need to keep the language simple. It is usually better to ask what a person did in a certain instance or over a certain period of time than for them to recall in general what happens. But you need to be realistic about what you can expect people to remember. And you need to define your terms. It is important to have just one idea in a question. If there are two ideas, use two questions. It is better to ask questions in positive terms if possible. Avoid a double negative, as that can be very confusing. In closed questions, you need to be careful about the alternatives you provide. You need to make it clear whether the person is supposed to choose one alternative or as many as they wish. And you need to make sure that the alternative choices do not overlap, and that they cover the whole range of alternatives. Often a category "other" can be used for alternatives you might have missed. You want to avoid influencing people's response, which can lead to non-sampling error, so you need to word the question as neutrally as possible. You need to be careful if you are asking a question that may be personal or upsetting. As we described in our previous video, it is very important to check your questions with a pilot survey, as this will identify potential problems. The more effort you put into devising the questions, the better quality data you will get.
Things that separates debating from public speaking is rebuttal, responding to what the team on the other side of the topic has said and explaining why they're wrong. When building a good rebuttal, there are 3 important steps to follow. First, give a brief one-sentence summary of the argument that the other team made, so your adjudicator knows what you're rebutting. Next, you need to explain why the argument made by the other team was incorrect. And there are lots of reasons why something could be wrong. But remember, you're trying to convince an adjudicator to see things your way, so always choose your most persuasive arguments against the other team. Lastly, you don't win a debate just by proving why the other team is wrong. You win by proving why your team is better than the other team too. That's why debating is all about comparisons. You need to convince the adjudicator to believe your team over the other team, and you can do that by providing reasons and examples to support your side of the topic. Let's say that my topic was that books are better than movies, and I was on the negative team. Someone on the affirmative team might say this:
My first point about why books are better than movies is that books allow your imagination to flow. This is because in books, there are no pictures, so you're forced to think about what everything looks like. Now you can imagine everything to be super cool and awesome, whereas if you're watching a movie and it gives you one perspective, it's kind of hard to imagine anything else. Now let's take a look at an example. If you're reading a book about a spaceship, then you can imagine the spaceship as being super cool and awesome and huge, whereas if you're watching a movie and it's kind of tiny and small, it ruins the experience for you. Therefore, because your imagination can flow, books are definitely better than movies.
That was a pretty good argument, Paul, but if I was to rebut that argument, I would say this. The affirmative team said that books help your imagination flow better than movies do. This is incorrect because things in books can be hard to visualize, especially if they're things that have been made up by the author, or if they haven't been described very well and there are no pictures to help. If things are hard to visualize, then it's tricky to imagine what they would look like, so your imagination is left a bit stuck. The negative case is better because movies help you visualize things. They let you see brand new creatures and brand new worlds, so it's easier for your imagination to go from there. So, movies help your imagination flow much better than books do.
Surveys, also called questionnaires, offer a standardized method of collecting both quantitative and qualitative data from individuals. A survey can be an excellent tool for gathering information about memories, knowledge, personal experiences, attitudes, and behaviors. The goal of good survey design is to ensure that the data you collect with your survey matches as closely as possible the authentic thoughts, feelings, and interests of your respondents. When a gap opens up between the real views of your respondents and the data that appears in your completed survey forms, this is called response bias. Techniques to minimize response bias have been developed over several decades of social science research, and you can use these techniques to make your survey results as accurate as possible. Your first step in the survey design process is to clearly identify the topic you are looking to investigate with your survey. Your research focus will point you towards the type of survey you should be designing. When you are ready to begin designing specific survey questions, you will need to decide whether to use open-ended or close-ended questions. The type of survey questions you use affects the amount of time required for data analysis. Open-ended questions allow respondents flexibility in how they respond and are useful for exploring new topics. Closed-ended questions offer a choice of pre-selected options. These are easy to administer and easy for respondents to complete, and they are quicker to process and analyze. But to ask closed-ended questions, you need to be able to account for the possible responses your participants might wish to give. Developing good survey questions requires creativity, knowledge about your topic, and vigilance in reducing response bias. Be sure to avoid double-barreled questions that combine 2 questions in one, and leading questions that reveal what results you are expecting. As you begin preparing your survey form, you will have to make a number of key decisions, including the type of question you will use. You can choose from a level of agreement scales, also known as Likert scales, multiple choice, or open-ended questions. Some survey researchers also use ranked response questions that ask respondents to rank their preferred responses, for example, from 1 to 5. You will need to develop the content and phrasing of your questions. When you are writing your questions, try to put yourself in your respondent's shoes and account for the ways they might misunderstand your questions and response options. Once you have written your initial set of questions, think about how you will sequence them in your survey form. For example, if you have open and closed-ended questions about the same specific topic, ask the open-ended question first so that the response options you provide in the closed-ended question don't influence the responses. Survey forms require a number of standard features. You normally include the survey form title at the top of the first page. You then have a brief introduction to your research, usually about 1 paragraph in length that summarizes your research aims, identifies you, and details your sources of funding. You then include your professional contact information, in case your respondent encounters a problem or needs to ask a question. At the end of the survey, you would typically include a concluding statement thanking respondents for participating. As you develop your survey, be consistent in your choice of phrasing and use of terminology. Avoid using too many different question types, such as Likert scale, multiple choice, and ranked response in the same survey, because it takes time and effort to get used to a new question type. Ensure questions are as brief as possible and use plain language. Avoid using jargon and technical terms whenever possible.